good to see a large-sized group here tonight. I commend you right from the get-go for caring about your health, because the first step really to being healthier is showing up, right? Beyond that, you're going to learn a lot of things tonight, and the next step beyond that is implementing that, because words without any action doesn't do us any good, right? So I encourage you to do that. Keep in mind, with everything that we talk about tonight, and along with all the things you ever hear me talk about in this office, if you're a patient here or not, with all the different advanced talks that we've put on and the ones that we will put on, the focus is always on maximizing you, maximizing your individual potential, making you as healthy as you can be, as naturally as possible, without the use of drugs or surgery or things like that, foreign things like that to our body. And our focus is always on the 5 essentials, okay? What are the 5 essentials? If you have never heard, maximizing your mind, your nerve supply, your nutrients, your diet, your exercise, and then minimizing your toxins. Those are the 5 essentials that we always talk about. And so tonight, our topic is toxicity in our food supply. It's another Maximized Living makeover, focusing on a food makeover. So food makeover meaning hopefully we change some of the habits that you have with your food tonight, just like a makeover that you get with makeup and things. You come out, you look different, right? With a food makeover, hopefully you come out of here eating a little bit different. And the focus is on toxicity, which obviously is essential number 5, minimizing your exposure to toxins. But what I want you to keep in mind is this. Before we get into any of this stuff, tonight what I'm going to share with you, in the beginning we're going to talk about a lot of different sources of toxins, and it can almost get overwhelming, almost a little bit depressing, because you start feeling like, geez, there's so many things out there that are exposing me to toxins and harming me. And then we're going to flip it, and I'm going to kind of bring out the sunshine then and tell you, look, here's the ways that we can deal with that. Think of it this way. Before we get into any of that stuff, each one of you guys, think of yourselves as a pond, okay? You're each your own individual pond. And with toxins, the more toxins that you're exposed to or that we put in our bodies, the more it fills up the pond, okay? So as the pond gets fuller and fuller and fuller, once the pond overflows, that's when we start to get signs and symptoms and have things that will be labeled diseases, okay? Now we each have a different size pond, okay? Your pond is a different size than my pond, different size than his pond, because we're all individuals. What determines the size of our pond is many things. One is genetics, but that's only a small role, okay? We can't change that, so we're not going to worry about it. That plays a really small role. The rest of it, the size of your pond, has to do with how you live your life, how you take care of yourself every day. These 5 essentials, okay? Those 5 essentials determine whether or not your pond is bigger or smaller. And the reason that that's important is because if your pond is really small, it's going to fill up really fast. And when you get exposed to toxins, you're going to get sick faster, have symptoms, signs, things that are labeled diseases. The larger you can make your pond, the more room you have for some toxins, because let's all admit that we're going to be exposed to toxins. Okay, I'm going to teach you ways to minimize that and ways to deal with that, but it's inevitable in the world that we live in. You're going to be exposed to toxins, and you're going to see several of the sources here. But the bigger our pond is, the more our body can handle toxins. Because have an appreciation for this, and this is the number one thing that we have an appreciation for as chiropractors in this clinic, is your body is an amazing organism that heals itself and takes care of itself as long as everything's working properly, okay? So, we're going to talk about a lot of different sources of toxins, but realize that your body does a pretty awesome job of getting rid of those toxins, detoxifying itself, because if it didn't, we'd all be dead, is basically the bottom line, okay? But there are things that we can do to make our detoxification system better, work better, and therefore minimize the effects of these things, all right? So, hopefully the information we go over tonight evokes a lot of questions, enthusiastic questions from you guys. I hope it does, because I love questions. It tells me that you're interested. However, I ask you, please reserve your questions for the end. because I have a lot of important information I want to make sure that I get through, and I'm going to do my darndest to keep it to an hour or less tonight. When I'm done, I'll stay as long as you guys want me to answer any questions that you have. All right? So, let's get started. Like I said, the topic tonight is a total food makeover, toxins in our food supply. So, the first question you really have to ask yourself is, are you toxic? Okay? And here's 9 simple questions to ask yourself whether or not you are toxic. And if you answer yes to even one of these, then the answer to the question is yes, you are. The more of them you answer yes to, the more you realize you're filling up that pond, the more toxic you are, okay? So if you can't read this, I'm going to read them real quick for you. 1, do you store your food in plastic containers? Do you eat non-organic meat or dairy? And by the way, notes are great. Take notes. I encourage you to. If there's anything that I go by too fast or you don't get notes on it, ask me afterwards. I can email you things. I can get you copies of things. Because I don't want you to have to feel like you have to write frantically and not pay attention. But take notes if you want to, but ask me later if you want some more information to take home. I'd be happy to provide it. Or email it to you or whatever. Back to this. Number 3, do you use a microwave? 4, do you use Teflon or nonstick cookware? Do you take medications? Do you drink city water? Do you drink diet sodas? Do you get flu shots? Do you have silver fillings in your mouth? We'll talk a little bit more about some of those here as we go, but that's just a real quick questionnaire to ask yourself, are you toxic or not? So, yeah, already we got some people, yeah, I sure am. So first of all, let's talk about food. That's one large source of toxicity. The foods that we eat today, I like to call them frankenfoods, because most of what we eat doesn't even resemble real food at this point, okay? It's fake. It's chemically manufactured or chemically made by chemists in a lab somewhere. These are all the additives, preservatives, artificial flavorings, artificial colorings, food dyes that are in our foods, okay? So, the FDA has approved about 3,000 different additives, preservatives, and colorings, and the average person, the average one of us, is consuming 150 pounds of these additives every year with the common diet. So, we talk about frankenfood. Here's one example. A strawberry milkshake from Burger King. The question is, where the heck are the strawberries? This is a list of ingredients, and I know that's too small for most of you to read, but I can promise you, it doesn't have any strawberries in there. What it's filled with is preservatives, additives, artificial flavorings, food colorings, artificial dyes, all those things that make up a long list of things that don't resemble food. A couple of really nice tools that you can use when you're trying to eat better foods is when you look at food labels, the general rule is the longer the ingredient list, usually the less healthy the food is for you. Okay? Good foods typically only have maybe one ingredient or maybe a couple ingredients. If I want almonds, it should say raw almonds. That's it. I don't need anything else in there, okay? Another good tool to use is when you're looking at the ingredient list, if you're finding things in there that you've never heard of or are very difficult for you to pronounce, again, the general rule is it's not good for you, because that usually means it's a chemical name of some chemical that was made in a lab. Again, not real food. Couple of tools for you to take home, okay? Let's talk about another frankenfood here, Lunchables. Now you might already be sitting there thinking, why is it that if this food is so bad for us or it has toxins in it, why does the government allow it to be sold? Why doesn't the Food and Drug Administration, ban this stuff? Well, usually the answer to those questions boils down to money, okay? If you look at Lunchables, it makes up 22% of the sales for Oscar Mayer. That amounts to approximately $500 million a year. Do you think maybe that has a reason for why these stay on the market? You bet it does. Here's the ingredient list. Again, I know you can't read it, but it's huge. It wouldn't even fit on my screen, okay? Again, what's this filled with? Additives, preservatives, artificial flavorings, colorings, junk. A bunch of toxins is what that is. So if you're eating that or your kids are eating that, stop. Please stop. Another frankenfood, Chicken McNuggets, okay? It has 38 ingredients, and most of it comes from corn. You might think corn, this is Chicken McNuggets. Why isn't it chicken? Well, corn, and that corn could be a whole topic in and of itself, no doubt. But corn, it's a huge crop in this country, okay? It's produced by a lot of farmers. It's widely available. It's cheap for somebody like McDonald's to use in their food source. But the problem with corn, and you'll find corn in all kinds of foods that you never would have expected. I challenge you, go home tonight and look at the ingredient list in several foods that you have in your pantry or in your refrigerator. Chances are you can find corn in there in some part of the label. Sometimes you have to know what to look for. It might not say corn, it might say something like corn syrup, but again, they're all derivatives of corn. Well, corn is cheap, so they put it in there. The problem with corn is it's very unhealthy. Corn is actually a grain, so for those of you that thought it was a vegetable, I used to think it was a vegetable. I used to eat corn because I thought it was a vegetable. It's not a vegetable. It's listed as a grain, and it's an extremely inflammatory grain that causes all kinds of problems with our health. If you were here for the last Total Food Makeover, we talked a lot about inflammation. We talked about it when we talked about how to prevent heart disease. So for some of you, this is a little bit of review. But remember, inflammation is the underlying cause of all the major diseases and illnesses in our country. Diabetes, heart disease, cancer, obesity, degenerative diseases, arthritis. All of those, the underlying cause is the inflammation caused by corn and other inflammatory grains. So that's why corn's bad, Chicken McNuggets are bad, and again, there's a ton of stuff in there that's toxic. Artificial flavorings, colorings, the list goes on. You get the idea. Here's a couple of really alarming ingredients in our Chicken McNuggets to show you that some of the toxins that are in here. One of them is an anti-foaming agent. So here, for those of you who can see it, this is what the anti-foaming agent is called. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, okay? It's some chemical name that probably half the chemists in the country couldn't pronounce correctly. Again, if you use our general rule, if you've never seen it and you can't pronounce it, it's probably not good for you. And guess what? It holds true here. This anti-foaming agent, it's a suspected carcinogen, meaning that it's suspected to cause cancer. And it's also been established as a mutagen, so it causes mutation in your genetics and your DNA. Tumorigenic, so it causes tumors and reproductive problems. Okay, that's in your Chicken McNuggets that we're eating. Here's another one. Again, look at that name. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. It has a nice short name, TBHQ, we'll call it that. But again, something that I can't pronounce. It doesn't look familiar to me, so it's probably not healthy. And guess what? It's not. It's actually a form of butane, a lighter fluid. It's been linked to nausea, vomiting, ringing in the ears, delirium, sense of suffocation, and collapse. So again, more toxins in our food supply. That's what we're eating when we have Chicken McNuggets.
Can we get a printout of that?
Certainly.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Can you write that down just so I don't forget to get a printout of that? So we talked about some frankenfoods. Okay, what's in the foods. Let's talk about pesticides, because maybe you're trying to do a good job and you're not eating a ton of frankenfoods and you're eating more fruits and vegetables, thinking you're doing a good job for yourself. Well, if you're not buying organic fruits and vegetables, they're sprayed with pesticides, okay? And pesticides, again, is another toxin, so it's going to increase our toxic load in each one of our ponds. There's 3 million tons of pesticides used every year worldwide. More than 1,600 chemicals are used to produce these toxins, and most of these have not been tested for their toxic effect on humans. So they're out there on all these foods, and we really don't know what effects they have on us, okay? Their exposure to these things in people has been linked to this list: nervous system disorders, immune system suppression, childhood cancer, breast cancer, diabetes, reproductive damage, hormone problems, asthma, ADHD, autism, migraine headaches, developmental delays. Okay? Now, what do most of us do if we have migraine headache? What's the first thing we do? Reach for the medicine cabinet, right? Pull out our Advil or our Tylenol. And we've talked some before about the dangers of some of these things. You might remember some of the studies that I pointed out that said chronic use of aspirin increases your risk of cancer.